Hi, I'm Johnny from SXS, and this video is about sound proofing, reducing noise levels, and general sound management. It's a pretty technical subject area, this one, so I thought we'd make a video that goes through some quite sort of tangible concepts that clients can easily understand without going into full-on deep audio theory and technology. We're just going to keep it simple in this video, just to get a few basic principles across. Our philosophy with noise management is that it's a two-pronged approach. The first thing is to reduce the acoustic energy and the way it's distributed in the first place. That's the things like the sound systems and the bands and so on. And the second step is to reduce the retransmission of sound, which is actually what the neighbours hear, which is what causes the noise complaints. So one of the first techniques we use is with the sound system design. And one of the biggest problem frequencies are the lower frequencies, also known as the bass, which is a bit that kind of rattles windows and really upsets the neighbours. So one of the techniques we use to manage that is called a cardioid bass array. These things are bass bins. They create the deep sound. And what we've done here is got one speaker facing the opposite direction, and using some complex phase inversion and time delay, we make it so that the energy that goes out the back is cancelled by the middle bass bin, but the energy out the front is significantly more. Now what that means is that we get the bass, which is an important part of the musical program, onto the dance floor or in the arena space, and it's enjoyable for the guests. They get good music. But in the areas where we don't want it, out to the sides or around the back of a stage, we get significantly less sub-bass frequencies. So by getting the sound managed properly in the first place, we actually reduce the need to have any physical soundproofing in a space, because we're getting the sound where we do want it and not where we don't. One of the other methods we use to reduce the noise energy created in the first place is what we call a distributed system. Think in really simple terms. If I've got headphones on and I'm listening to some really loud music, if you're standing next to me, it's nowhere near as loud. It's obvious. Likewise, if I've got a speaker in my living room and I want it to be a certain level of loudness, everyone else in that room is going to be subjected to it. The point I'm making is, by speakers being basically closer to you, you can have it louder and it's not as loud for the next person. Pretty simple, obvious stuff. We use that same principle with speakers in an arena space or a dance floor. So here's one speaker, which is a Martin Audio DD6. If we wanted to achieve a consistent sound pressure level across a dance floor, for example, it would need to be of a certain amplitude for someone at the back of the dance floor to be able to hear at that level. So what we do instead is we'll use multiple speakers dotted around the dance floor, and they can all be of a slightly lower level to give the same perceived volume for each person on the dance floor. It's basically spreading speakers around a space. Very simple, but it works really well in spaces like marquees or hotel function rooms, where it's a very enclosed space and we can concentrate the sound in one area. One of the other technologies that we use for managing sound inside the audience arena is line array technology. This is a Martin Audio system, which we're very keen on. I'll explain in quite simplified terms. Loosely speaking, each cabinet has a very directional sound propagation. And what we do is angle each box separately, such that it targets different areas of a dance floor or audience arena or event space. So what that means is that the sound's focused on those areas and it's not being thrown out everywhere. Whereas with traditional PA, what we call point source, it's basically throwing the noise out in every direction. It's very uncontrolled and it's going everywhere. So the level of acoustic energy is extremely high. With this, because you're getting sound where you want it, nowhere else, you don't need as much acoustic energy in the first place. This is appropriate for venues where we've got a bit more ceiling height, so that we can get this a bit higher up, and it allows us to get a much more even sound coverage over an entire audience area. So this is what we'll use when we've got the ceiling height for it. So the next part of noise management is about reducing the amount of acoustic energy that reaches the nearest nuisance area. So we've created the sound inside the event space, be it from the sound system or the band or whatever. We then want to stop that sound getting to the neighbour who's going to complain about the noise. One of the techniques we use to do this is our proprietary blocker panels. That's what I'm standing in front of here. It's a high-density composite foam with a PVC double liner on it. Now what that does is, when acoustic energy goes into the panel, it absorbs it and it prevents it from retransmitting. Very much the same as if you put a pillow over your head, you'd find that you'd get less noise going into your ears. Same basic principle. We've got a concept called an absorption coefficient as well. What that is different materials absorb different frequencies of sounds at different rates. So we've gone for a very, very heavy, thick foam here because it becomes more effective at absorbing lower frequencies. However, you don't get true sub-bass frequencies. That's why, while this stuff is really good and helps a lot, it doesn't completely mitigate all frequencies. So this is where a sort of overall, more global noise management plan is critical, because we need to target each of the frequencies and know which ones are going to be the most problematic on your specific site. So this is one of the techniques, and one of the first ones we use, because it is very, very good, but we typically use it in conjunction with other equipment and other methods as well. The next material I want to show you is black wool serge. This is made of wool. It's quite a thick material and it's used extensively in events and theatres to control acoustics and lighting and to dress venues. What it also does is it absorbs acoustic energy. Now there's two reasons that's good. One is that if you're in a space where it's quite echoey, like in this warehouse we're in right now, or a sports hall or an aircraft hangar, that echoiness, or reverb as we call it, reduces the intelligibility of spoken word. And it also makes music or other audio content quite hard to listen to because it's quite fatiguing on the brain to process all that complex sound coming at you. So in venues like that, we can use this to dress the walls or the ceiling to reduce that level of reverb and echo, thereby make it a much more sort of warmer feeling space that's got better acoustic intelligibility. And because it absorbs acoustic energy, it's also very good when used in conjunction with blocker panels to reduce the amount of noise that's transmitted beyond a venue. So for example, we might use this inside a shed or a venue or a marquee where there's noise problems outside. By lining the inside of the building with this, it'll absorb a lot of that noise and prevent it from exiting the venue. And because black wool serge is the way it is, it's also quite a good way of dressing venue walls. So if we're in a venue where it might not be very attractive, black wool serge is a good way to get it back to a sort of base aesthetic, which we can then apply decor and other features to on top of that. Now, one of the other important principles of reducing the retransmission of acoustic energy is the number of layers you use. Very much like in heat insulation, the more layers, essentially the better insulation you get. Same with sound. So what we often do is do multiple layers of black wool serge, blocker panels, and we space them apart. So where we've got a site where we've got to really get the noise levels right down, we'll often do black wool serge a foot, maybe 2 foot apart, and then also blocker panels spaced further apart. That multiple layering effect has a really big impact on reducing the noise that's transmitted, but also it becomes a lot more effective across a range of frequencies. So that gives you a bit of an overview of the way that we approach the management of noise for live events. What's really important to know though is these are just a few of the techniques that we use, and it's all about an all-encompassing approach and philosophy towards the noise management. It's not as simple as just do 1 or 2 of these things. So we encourage you to get in contact, let us know what the event is, what the challenges are. We can speak to local authorities, look at the venue, and then put both the equipment in place, but also the regime in place such that we can keep stakeholders happy.